Okay, and is it correct that this month, October 12th, a little more than 2.5 weeks ago, I asked you the question under oath on line 22, and credit is an important point to be agreed to under an agreement. Is that correct?
Is that not correct?
Oh, is that not correct?
I said yes.
So your position is credit is not an important term to be agreed to?
It depends on the situation.
Well, for you to do work in a movie, do you think credit is an important term to be agreed to between you and your employer?
It can be, yes.
And isn't it true that in every agreement that you have negotiated through your lawyer or yourself, you've always reached an agreement on what credit you were to get for that movie?
Not always.
Okay, with respect to the written agreements, isn't it true in every written agreement that you have entered into, credit has been agreed to?
I'd have to review all my agreements, sir.
You don't remember?
Well, in some situations it applies, and other times I believe it's at the it's the production company that will make the determination.
Isn't it true you wanted to get that special fight trainer credit for Mr. Van Damme on the movie Bloodsport?
Yes.
You thought that was important to get the production company to agree to that credit for you, did you not?
Yes.
And it's also true with respect to that credit. Mr. Van Damme was not a party to that contract, was he?
To what contract, sir?
The contract that gave you a credit as special fight trainer on the movie Bloodsport.
No, he was not.
And nobody even discussed with Mr. Van Damme whether that would be acceptable to him, correct?
I don't know that to be true.
But to your knowledge?
I don't know that to be true.
Did you ever discuss it with him, that you should get that credit?
I believe it came up.
And you asked for his permission?
I believe he knew I was going to get a credit for that.
That's not the question, if he knew you were going to get the credit. Did you ask Mr. Van Damme for permission from him to agree to the fact that you would get a credit as the special fight trainer for Mr. Van Damme in the movie Bloodsport? Yes or no?
I don't recall.
All right. Now, let's look as to, isn't it true that you had not reached agreement on most of the terms under this proposed consulting agreement for you to render services other than writing with Mr. Van Damme prior to March of '91?
I disagree.
Turn to the second page.
He's looking at his deposition on second page of
I'm
which
sorry,
exhibit?
no, Exhibit 106, Your Honor.
Exhibit 106, Mr. Duke.
In fact, just so it's clear, the first page, as Mr. Frankel testified, Roman rule 1. You can turn to the, tell me when you have 106, Mr. Duke.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you see there's two Roman numerals.
Yes, sir.
Roman rule 1 dealt with a writing services agreement, and number 2 had to do with an other services agreement. You see that reference?
Yes, sir.
And you turn to the second page.
Yes.
And it was your understanding that as of March '91, supposedly you were going to get paid $50,000 for your writing services and $50,000 for your consulting services, correct?
Between myself and the production company, yes.
Is it correct, Mr. Dukes, that your lawyer had negotiated on your behalf that you were going to receive $50,000 for your writing services? Yes or no?
With the production company, yes.
The company that owned the rights to your services on this movie, is that correct?
That owned the property, yes.
Okay. And is it also true at this time that your lawyer was trying to negotiate an agreement as to what other services you were to perform on this film?
If I'm reading this letter correctly, he wasn't the one negotiating it. This is to Mr. Kotlowitz, and I believe it was Mr. Kotlowitz who was negotiating it.
Move to strike. It's not responsive, Your Honor.
All right, motion to strike is granted. Jury instructed to disregard it. Listen to the question again, Mr. Dukes.
I'm sorry.
And answer it. Is it correct that your lawyer, Mr. Frankel, was negotiating with the production company as to what other services you were supposed to render for this additional $50,000? Did you know about that?
At one point, yes, that's true.
Well, you knew it when you got a copy of Exhibit 106, did you not? It says carbon copy Frank Dux. Did you see that letter?
I see it, but I'm also...
Excuse me. Did you see the letter on or about March 11th, 1991?
Yes.
Or did you not see it until this lawsuit was filed?
I believe I saw it around that time.
Okay, now your lawyer wrote, I have major concerns with respect to the other services you were supposed to render. Is it true that as of this date, there had been no definition of the type of services you were to render for the additional services beyond your writing services?
Between who and who, Mr. Singer?
For you to render services on the movie. Let's forget about for whom. You were going to render services for this film, is that true? Or you're going to render services separately for Mr. Van Damme?
I don't know how to define that, sir, but
Okay.
I rendered services for both.
Did you agree to get paid money so that you would render services on this movie project known as Enter the New Dragon?
Yes, I rendered services, and I was paid. I'm sorry, Mr. You
When
go
Mr.
on, and I get lost.
If you get lost, just tell me and I'll rephrase the question.
Correct.
When Mr. Van Damme offered to pay you money, you knew you were going to have to do something in response to that offer, correct?
Correct.
You weren't just going to have to sit there and think the paycheck was going to come in, true?
True.
You knew you were going to have to render services.
True.
And you knew you were going to be rendering services on the project known as Enter the New Dragon, correct?
Well, I began rendering services, sir, before there was even the concept had been immortalized.
My question to you is this. Did you have an understanding that you did not have to render any more services after Mr. Van Damme allegedly promised you $100,000 and 4 gross points on this movie? Yes or no?
You go on too long for me to process your
All right, I'll
question.
rephrase it. Mr. Van Damme makes you an offer to pay you money, correct?
Yes.
You were supposed to do something in order to get paid the money, right?
Yes.
And you were going to have to render services to get paid the money, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now we're on the same wavelength. And as of March 1991, is it correct that you had not yet reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme or the production company as to all the type of services you were going to have to perform?
That's not correct.
So even though your lawyer said we need to get a definition of the type of service to be performed, he was wrong, correct?
I don't read it that way.
Your lawyer writes, I have major concerns with regard to the other services to be rendered. It is my understanding that my client will receive an additional $50,000 to act as a non-exclusive technical and creative consultant on the project, which is known as Enter the New Dragon. And these are his concerns at that time, correct?
That's correct.
And you spoke to your lawyer about your alleged deal with Jean-Claude Van Damme, correct? You spoke to your lawyer about your alleged agreement with Mr. Van Damme. Is that true?
Yes, we discussed it at times.
Okay, and so when your lawyer drafted this, he knew what you had told him about your alleged agreement, correct? Based on what you told him.
He knew about some of the terms, yes, but not all. I kept him out of it.
I didn't ask you if you kept him out of the negotiation. That's not what I asked you. My question was very simple. You told him what your deal was, yes?
Between myself and Mr. Van Damme,
Did you tell him that?
we discussed portions of it, yes, but not at length.
So you mean you told him he was going to pay you the money, but you never told him what services you're going to have to perform to get paid the money? Is that what you told him?
I kept Mr. Frankel out of the loop, if you will, in regards to the fact that Mr. Van Damme had asked me not to use him as my attorney. So I didn't use him as my attorney between the agreement between myself and Mr. Van Damme.
Thank you very much for that answer. Now maybe you can answer my question.
Your Honor, can we not have the side sarcastic comments from the professional?
There are difficulties on both sides. I don't know.
I would
Mr. Dux,
appreciate if the witness would be instructed to answer the questions that are being asked of him.
again going to ask you to answer the question directly and not try to go around it.
Sir, I'm not trying to.
I simply asked you, did you ever tell your lawyer before March of '91 the services that you were supposed to render under this alleged agreement with Mr. Van Damme? Yes or no?
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, okay.
I mean,
That's your answer. You don't know how to answer it.
So you can't remember if you told him or not? What services you were going to have to perform to get paid the money under your alleged agreement from Mr. Van Damme?
I remember a third party telling my attorney the terms.
I'm asking what you told him. I'm not interested if anyone else did.
I don't recall exactly what I told him, sir.
I can understand that. My question is very simple. Did you tell him or did you not tell him the work that you were going to have to do to get paid?
Between myself and Mr. Van Damme or Nice Type Productions.
Isn't it true you were going to render writing services where you're supposed to get paid the $100,000 and the gross points on this movie? Is that true?
I wasn't the one to first inform him of that, no.
Move to strike. It's not responsive.
Granted, Mr. Dux, the question was, not did you inform him, the question was, weren't you supposed to render writing services in order to be entitled to receive the $100,000 plus this 4%?
With Mr. Van Damme, yes.
Yes.
And did Mr. Van Damme allegedly tell you to render other services on
Yes.
this movie? Okay. And am I correct, you never reached an agreement on what those other services were to be by you on this movie, correct?
No, sir.
You did reach an agreement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So was your understanding that the production company wanted you to render more services than what Mr. Van Damme asked you to render to get paid? Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true you never reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme on the limitation of the time? And look at paragraph 2, B2. Isn't it true there was never an agreement reached between Mr. Van Damme and you on the issue of the limitation on the time frames involved? What is the time frame during which the services are rendered? When do they start? When do they end? What do they encompass? You see that whole paragraph? Isn't it true you never reached an agreement?
Sir, give him a chance to answer. You asked him if he saw the paragraph, question mark, stop. Do you see that paragraph?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, next question.
Is it true you did not reach an agreement with Mr. Van Damme on those services allegedly to be rendered as referred to in that paragraph?
To be honest with you, I don't understand the paragraph.
Is it true, before the date of that letter,
Yes, sir.
that you did not have an agreement with Mr. Van Damme as part of this oral agreement that you've testified to as to when your work is supposed to start and how long it's going to be and when is it going to end? Was that part of your oral agreement with Mr. Van Damme? That's his question.
Yes.
Okay, when were they supposed to end? Well,
When I completed my work.
well, would you complete your work when you wrote the script, or would you complete the work when the movie was finished?
Objection, Your Honor. It gives them only two possibilities there.
or any other possibility. Exclude the conversations that may have occurred sometime later. Let's talk about when you reached your agreement before this letter, based on the discussions that you had prior to March of 91. What was your agreement with Mr. Van Damme as to when your services were going to stop?
When I fulfilled my obligations and the list of things he asked me to do for him.
That's not my question. Is when were they going to end? In other words, were you going to have to be a fight choreographer on the movie? Was that one of the things you were supposed to do?
No.
Oh.
It was one of the things I was supposed to make myself available for.
Oh, he asked you to make yourself available to render those services. Is that true?
Yes.
So you had an understanding that you were going to have to render the services to get paid when?
Now it's got two questions in one.
Okay, I'll ask you again, Mr. Dukes. Mr. Van Damme asked you to be available to render fight choreographer services. Did you reach an agreement as to when those services would begin?
It would begin when he called for me to do the film.
So it would call when the movie would get started?
Yes.
Okay. And would it end when the movie would be completed?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. But your lawyer was never told that, correct?
You're talking about two different time frames, Mr. Singer.
No, I'm
One
asking
point you
you-
said before March and one after.
We're still talking before March 18, the date of that letter.
Yes, sir.
You tell that to your lawyer.
I don't believe I did, sir.
Does Jean-Claude Van Damme tell you that he intends to have you travel with him?
At one point, yes, he told me that.
And did he also tell you that he intends to have you scout locations with him?
Yes.
And did he also tell you that he wanted you to call him to advise of costume designers?
Yes.
And am I correct, you never reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme that if you rendered those services, whether you were going to get paid a particular amount of money as you rendered those services?
As I read, no.
So you didn't reach an agreement with him on that issue, correct?
No, not that way, no.
Okay, so your lawyer was correct here when he said, does this key payment, that the agreement that you allegedly reached with Mr. Van Damme, you had never reached an agreement as to when you would get paid, if anything, to do these types of work. Is that correct?
If you're citing this letter, Mr. Singer, I believe this has nothing to do with my agreement between me and Mr. Van Damme, but what was taking place during the production company and myself.
Excuse me. I would appreciate you would simply answer my question. Move to
But
strike, Your Honor.
didn't you point to the...
Mr. Singer, the difficulty he's also having is, in his mind, there are two agreements.
I
One with the
understand.
production company, one Mr. Van Damme. You are referencing a letter addressed to the production company.
Excuse me, isn't it true this letter is addressed to Mr. Van Damme's agent, not the production company?
Yes.
So this was not a letter sent to the production company, it was a letter sent to Mr. Van Damme's agent.
Yes.
And Mr. Van Damme's agent was being asked by your lawyer when you were supposed to get paid for these services, correct?
In respect to the production company, yes.
But the question I asked you is, whether it was with the production company or Mr. Van Damme, you never reached an agreement on when you would be paid for those particular services with respect to Mr. Van Damme.
Yes, I did.
Well, when were you going to get paid if you traveled with him? Would he pay you then?
No.
You never discussed it with him, isn't that true?
No, we discussed it.
He told you if he asked you to travel with him, he discussed with you how much you were going to get paid and when you would get paid?
No, he said the production company would take care of it. That he shifted his obligation of $100,000 to the production company.
That's true. He told you, as of March 1991, his obligation to pay you money had been shifted from him, allegedly, to the production company, correct?
I agreed to do it that way, yes.
So you knew as of March 91, that to the extent you were going to be paid any money, it wasn't going to be by Mr. Van Damme, it wasn't going to be paid by the production company, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. He said the $100,000.
Overruled.
The gross points I was supposed to be paid at the end of the picture when it was released.
Move to strike. It's not responsive.
Motion is granted. Please
Please answer the
rephrase the question and answer it directly, and let's give him the question.
Isn't it correct that Mr. Van Damme told you that your payment was going to be shifted from himself to the production company?
I can't answer your question that way, sir.
Okay, well, you just volunteered a few minutes ago that as of March 91, Mr. Van Damme told you that to the extent he ever told you were going to get paid any money, that obligation had been shifted to the production company. Those are the words he used, correct?
Only the $100,000.
Excuse me. Did he use the words, whatever, assuming I was supposed to make you any payment, whatever those payments, he said, the payment obligations are shifted to the production company. Those are the words he used.
Is that a question?
Yes, were the words used?
I don't understand you.
Okay.
You went on for too long, Mr.
I'll
Singer. I'm
rephrase
sorry.
it. We're
I'm having a hard
focused.
time following you.
I'm trying to find out what you and Mr. Van Damme spoke about. You just testified a few minutes ago that Mr. Van Damme told you, as of about March of 91, at a point that the production company agreed to take on this project, you had a discussion with him. You remember the discussions you had with him then?
Yes.
And one of the discussions you had with him, he said, you're going to get paid by the production company. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you. And he never told you, strike that. Those are the words he used. When you now start to deal with the production company, he said, you're now going to get paid by the production company, correct?
Those weren't his exact words, no.
Was his words, in effect, Frank, now the production company has the project, you'll get paid by the production company?
Yes.
Okay. And is it true, also, with respect to any discussions you had with Mr. Van Damme concerning any notice that he would give you, strike that, is it true that you and Mr. Van Damme never reached an agreement as to how much notice he was going to have to give you before you had to leave your dojo or whatever else work you were working on to do work on this movie?
I was already given notice. So.
He gave you notice, excuse me, he gave you the notice to start traveling with him prior to March of 91?
No.
He told you, I want you to do fight choreography services on this movie. He told you, I'd like you to do that.
Yes.
And you understood it was what's known as non-exclusive, true?
Yes.
What is it meant by non-exclusive?
I could go work for other people at the same time.
Right, but you understood with a non-exclusive arrangement that Mr. Van Damme, excuse me, that you should be given some notice ahead of time before you had to stop working on something and now start working on the movie. You had that understanding.
Yes.
And am I correct? You never reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme on the amount of time you would be given advance notice before he asked you to stop working on this, now work on the movie.
As to a particular amount of time, no.
So you never reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme on that subject, correct?
No, not on the subject. You broadened it now. Would you stick to your answer to your original questions and don't amplify?
You didn't reach an agreement with Mr. Van Damme on the amount of notice he would have to give you before you were asked to now render services on the movie and stop working on whatever you were working on at that time.
I don't know how to answer that question, Mr. Singer.
My question is, did you reach an agreement on that subject matter? Yes or no? With Mr. Van Damme?
I still don't know how to answer that question because I had already been given notice to begin work and I was working. How can you notice me twice if I'm already in the middle of working? I don't know how to answer that.
You don't know how to answer that? Well, maybe I'll try to explain it to you.
Your Honor, could we perhaps also, can I have also an objection to the condescension as well?
Condescension, objection on the grounds of condescension is granted.
Thank you, Judge.
Is it the witness or the attorney, though?
Both. I didn't specify. Mr. Dux,
Yes, sir.
did you have an understanding with Mr. Van Damme as to when you're supposed to stop working on whatever project you were doing and start working on the film?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that amount of time that you were supposed to be given?
Well, like when he called me, when it was the next day.
Other than that instance,
Right.
supposing 3 months down the road,
Yeah.
you were doing something or not doing something, did you have any understanding with him that, Frank, I now need you to start helping me with fight choreography? Did he have to give you any advance notice?
No.
Okay. There you go. Take it from
So
there.
as I understand your testimony, Mr. Dukes,
Geez, I wish you wouldn't do that. I know what's going to happen.
no, I just want to understand.
I get it clarified. You're going to
No, I
confuse
just
it
want to
again.
understand. At this time in March of '91, you didn't know when the movie was going to get made, did you?
It was represented to me that we were going to start shooting in 1992, as soon as we were done with the writing the script.
And you were done with the script in February '92, correct?
I think we were done with the last polish of the script in 92.
In fact, I think it's 164. You can look at Exhibit 164, just so it's clear. I think that's the last payment. Is that a $2,500 gross payment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what's the date?
2/10/92.
Okay. So your alleged agreement with Mr. Van Damme was sometime around February 1, '91,
Yes, sir.
and you finished writing the script on February 10, '92. Is that correct?
I don't know if we finished the script. I know we got paid then.
Well, isn't it true under your agreement that the last payment of the $2,500 was held back until you did the last polish on the script?
Well, yes, given a week or 2 weeks for the check to be cut and given to us, I don't know that that would be February when the script was done.
Okay, and then you understood after the script was done, they would go out and cast to get actors who would be in the movie. True?
They would start, I believe they'd start pre-production, yes.
Well, they wouldn't start pre-production on a movie until the script was finished, right?
I've seen projects where they have.
Did you have a discussion with Mr. Van Damme? We're going to start working on this movie on pre-production before you even finish the script?
I didn't have a discussion with them that, no.
And you had an understanding that before pre-production began, you were going to have to do some sort of strike that. Before you did any pre-production, you had an understanding that the script had to be finished, right?
Yes.
And you understood that how long would pre-production take?
Well,
Minimum.
Minimum would be maybe 4 weeks, 5
Didn't-
weeks.
Didn't you discuss with Mr. Van Damme that pre-production would be 8 weeks?
I believe so.
Okay. So Mr. Van Damme and you discussed that if this movie got made, you'd need pre-production at least 8 weeks, correct?
It depended on the budget, but yes.
Okay. And did he also discuss with you that if this movie got made, will take about 22 weeks to finish shooting this film?
Use those words, yes.
So he told you to be approximately 30 weeks that you would be working on this movie in pre-production and production, correct?
If he chose to use me, yes.
But you had to be made available, right?
I made myself available to him,
Okay.
yes.
But those discussions took place with you before March of '91. You knew you would have to write the script, and after the script got completed, you would have to work afterwards, potentially another 30 weeks, in order to get fully paid by Mr. Van Damme. True?
Not true.
What wasn't true, what I said to you?
Because if he didn't want me there, I wouldn't necessarily have to work during that time period.
But as of February 91, did he discuss with you, if I don't want you there, is that what he said to you? I don't want you there?
No.
Isn't it true he told you, I want you there?
Yes.
Okay, so when I'm talking about your agreement, he told you, I want you working on this movie. Didn't he tell you that?
As of March 1, he did, yes.
And he never told you, as of the time you finished writing this script in February 92, well, limit to March, as of, you had reached your deal as of March of 91, correct?
My deal with him, sir.
Mr. Van Damme.
Yes. I'm pointing at the board, that's what nice tie.
Dave, don't assume my eyes wander, just like I trip over them, so don't worry about my eyes. All right, so he told you he wanted you to work on the movie. So when you made the deal, you knew you're going to have to write a script and potentially work 8 weeks pre-production and 22 weeks production, correct?
Correct.
So you knew going in that this project is going to take more than a year before it actually got completed with all your services.
No, I did know that to be true.
Well, it took you until February 92 to write the script, didn't it? That was a year after you had the alleged promise.
Yes.
Did you delay writing the script? Or did you do it diligently so you could get paid whatever money was promised you by the production company of Mr. Van Damme?
I did it diligently.
And it took you a year? Well, so the jury can understand, you didn't actually write for a year, true?
I wrote with Ed Kamara.
Okay, but you didn't write the entire year, isn't that true?
I mean, day in and day out?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, your testimony is that every day, when did you start writing this movie?
Again, writing it about the first to second week of February.
Okay, so your testimony to this jury is that every day from first week in February 91 until sometime around February 10, 92, you were writing this script?
I was involved in the writing of the script, yes.
No, I didn't ask you if you were involved in writing the script. Is it your testimony, Mr. Dux?
That every day...
Excuse me, let me ask you the question. That every day between February 91 until sometime around February 10, 92, you were actually rendering writing service and working on that script?
No.
And is it true the way it worked is you would deliver a draft to the production company, and then the production company would give you comments? Is that true?
Yes.
And then there would be a time period lapse between the production company giving you the comments before you would start writing another draft, correct?
Correct.
And the same thing happened 3 or 4 times before you turned in your final polish.
Correct.
And during that time period when the production company had the project and they hadn't given you any comments, you weren't rendering writing services at that time, were you?
No, sir.
So when you testified previously, a few minutes ago, that you were writing every day from February 91 through February 92, that was not correct.
In regards to this project, that's not true. I wasn't just writing the script for Mr. Van Damme. I was also putting together a book of choreography. I was also putting together a book of locations. I mean, there's other services I was providing.
Mr. Dukes, I asked you a simple question before.
In regards to writing service?
Writing services. When I asked you, did you write every day from February of 91 through February 92, that answer was not true.
That I didn't understand your question, sir.
That's not my question. Was your answer not correct?
Could you restate the question, please?
I'll withdraw it. Did Mr. Van Damme and ever you discussed the issue of travel, right? Mr. Van Damme wanted you to travel.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever discuss with him whether you'd get paid when you travel with him?
Yes.
Did you reach an agreement as to how much you're going to get paid? What's known as a per diem, as referred to in Exhibit 106.
Which is it, Your Honor? Two questions here.
As referred to in Exhibit 106.
Between myself and Mr. Van Damme, no.
Well, did you have an understanding that Mr. Van Damme asked you to travel? You're supposed to get paid for whatever travel expenses you incur.
Yes.
And you and Mr. Van Damme never reached an agreement on that subject, did you?
No, we didn't.
And you never reached an agreement with Mr. Van Damme as to what kind of credit you're going to get for this film. Is that correct?
Your Honor, this I think is like the fourth time that's been asked.
Objection sustained, asked and answered. And before the next question, we're going to recess for lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, you are excused for your lunch recess until 1:30. Please remember my admonitions, and I'll see you back here at 1:30.
And Mr. Kramer, he was your lawyer in April 28, 1998, correct?
Correct.
And approximately 6 months ago, one day, Mr. Kramer was authorized as your attorney to send this letter to the Writers Guild, wasn't he?
Yes.
And as of April 1998, the Writers Guild had already made a determination that you were not entitled to get a writing credit as a screenwriter for the film The Quest, correct?
Correct.
So, and you knew, as of April, only 6 months ago, that you weren't entitled to get paid any more profits for your writing services, whether it be gross points or net points. Isn't that true?
My writing services for Nice Tie, yes, that's true.
No, I didn't ask you for nice time. Is it correct that with respect to any writing service you rendered under your alleged oral agreement with Mr. Van Damme, or your written agreement with Nice Tie, under either agreement, alleged agreement that you have, as of April 1998, you knew you had no right to get paid any profits?
Well, there's a difference between profits and gross points, but I would agree with you with profits.
Okay, isn't it true that as of April 1998, you had no right to get paid any gross points from Mr. Van Damme as of this date as a result of the Writers Guild arbitration that occurred a year earlier?
I believe I was entitled to my gross points, sir.
Okay, now, your lawyer wrote this letter, and you have the exhibit in front of you so you don't have to strain your eyes?
What exhibit would that be, sir?
Here, I'll open it for you.
Sir, I can...
I understand. Is that all right? To move this along?
No, let him do it,
Okay.
and just give him the number.
156. Now, in fact, the second paragraph of this letter does state, this arbitration is based on an agreement to pay Frank Dux $100,000 for screenwriting services and rights to the story Enter the New Dragon, a.k.a. The Big Fight, later called That Quest. 1/2 of that amount remains unpaid. Was that correct? As of this date, the 1/2 of $100,000 remains unpaid?
I believe so.
And is it also correct that the alleged agreement that you had with Mr. Van Damme was that he was going to promise to pay you $100,000 plus, excuse me, am I correct that when you initially entered into the agreement, before the Writers Guild made their determination, Mr. Van Damme allegedly agreed to pay you $100,000 plus points for your services in writing the story and screenplay? Dukes agreed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is it also correct however, Dux has yet to receive the second portion of the compensation, the additional $50,000. There is nothing on the record or in the existing documentation that exculpates Universal or Van Damme from fulfilling the obligation to Dux. The agreement has always been that Dux receive $100,000 for writing services and his underlying rights to the story. And is it also correct, there only remains at issue to be arbitrated the $50,000 owed Dux for his story rights. Is that correct?
It's written there, yes.
And is it correct that because you knew the Writers Guild had already made the determination that you do not get a writing credit, the only thing that was remained owing as of this date 6 months ago allegedly was the sum of $50,000 as referred to in this letter?
As referred to in this letter, it says points.
No. As of the concluding paragraph.
Your Honor, could you be seated sidebar, please, very briefly?
And it's one of the sidebars that comes up periodically in this case because the judge is rather strict about speaking objections. When there's an objection, he wants the lawyers to come up to them and to the bench and to express up there so the jury can't hear it, the reasons why they are objecting. John, earlier on, the judge was admonishing Martin Singer over and over again for asking what the judge said were improper questions, too convoluted. You say that that he has a very high reputation in entertainment lawyer circles.
Yes, he does. He is a tough negotiator, and he's a tough cross-examiner, as we see. Yeah. And that's his style.
Yeah. He is not patient with people who can't turn the wheels, the mental wheels as fast as he can.
He's not patient at all. He's running at 10 times the speed of everybody else.
Well, they resolved whatever it was. We go back into the courtroom.
Isn't it true that
what he had done and
paragraph of the April 28, 1998 letter
All. By anyone.
There was no cuts. You'll see for yourself, Mr. Singer.
Mr. Bruce, again, I'm going to ask you to remember the question and answer it directly. Just because I'm not sitting on the bench hasn't changed.
I'm saying yes, it wasn't edited.
There was no editing done.
Not
Is that
to
your
my knowledge,
testimony?
no.
Well, didn't that portion of the tape that was shown at the stadium done at an editing facility in North Hollywood?
No.
Well, wasn't part of this tape shot in an editing facility in North Hollywood? And
No.
Can I finish the question? And some of it was shot at a shooting range?
No.
Was any of it shot at a shooting range?
One portion of it, yes.
And one portion was shot in another location?
Yeah, when I did it in Paris, France.
No, I'm talking about the portion. Okay, am I correct, Mr. Dux? Your testimony is no one has ever edited a videotape on your behalf since...
Asked and answered, Judge.
You've never had that tape or any other tape edited?
Asked and answered, Judge.
No, I never had it edited. This is the way I got it.
I object to the authenticity of this tape. There's no foundation that this witness did not edit. He's the only person that had this tape in his...
lay on further foundation, Mr. Bruce.
Have you had this videotape, Mr. Dukes, in your possession since the tape was shot?
Yes,
And is the person and the people on the video, you and people who you observed being filmed at the time it was being filmed?
yes,
Has there been any editing whatsoever, deletion, whatever you want to call it, since then?
yes. There's never been any.
There's never been any? I offer Exhibit 18, Your Honor.
Just one further question. Was this tape one that in your home when you had the earthquake?
No, I think I got this later. It was sent by a friend in Paris. Frank
Well,
Dux.
he just asked you that ever since it was shot in 19...
It's another tape, Mr. Singer. I
Excuse me.
mean, I have friends, I get stuff back.
Let me just ask another question.
You're not letting him finish the question.
When was this tape shot?
This tape was shot in 1993, from what I understand.
And you didn't get the tape until after the earthquake in 1994?
I believe I got it after the earthquake.
So you did not have this videotape in your exclusive possession since it was shot. Is that correct?
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, it's very simple. The video was shot sometime in 1993, correct?
The event was shot in 1993, sir. This is a telecast. This is a replay of the telecast that appeared all over Europe.
And you have a tape of that telecast, correct?
Yes.
And that tape was not in your exclusive possession since it was shot. It was in the possession of someone else, correct?
The company that shot it, yes.
The company that shot it.
Yes.
And you have no knowledge, as you sit here today, whether that company edited that tape at all. Forms, correct?
Well, they have edits in it, like they edit every tape.
Well, when I just asked you
Well,
a
it's
few
shot live. I mean, Mr. Singer,
I asked you a few minutes ago whether that tape was edited or if anyone ever edited a tape on your behalf. Do you remember? You said no.
you said on my behalf, sir.
Well, is it correct then that that tape that you intend to show the jury has been edited by someone after the event?
I believe they edited it as the event was going on, during the event, sir.
You believe. You have no knowledge as you sit here.
This is from the show. It was shot live, sir.
Mr. Dux, you have no knowledge when the editing occurred, whether it was before, during, or after.
I disagree. I saw the cameras. I saw the editing booth when they were shooting it. It was telecast, and that's what this is. This is the telecast.
No further questions.
All right, no problem, no sufficient foundation. The video will not be allowed in.
Mr. Dukes, when you performed that event, that demonstration with bulletproof glass, if it was, as Mr. Singer insinuated, plexiglass, would you have gotten glass shards in your feet?
Well,
If it was plexiglass and not real glass and not real bulletproof glass, would you have gotten shards in your feet?
I didn't get the shards at that time, sir.
When did you get the shards?
I did a demonstration during the event where I did a bottle break. I broke a Jack Daniels bottle with my hand, which you would have seen. You also would have seen a double kick without having my foot go to the ground.
Mr. Duke.
I'm just trying to explain it.
Sir, the question has to do with the bulletproof glass that allegedly you broke with your bare hands, not any bottles.
That's my fault, Your Honor. I'll rephrase the question. It's my fault, not the witnesses. Forgive me. With regard to the suggestion or insinuation by Mr. Singer that when you broke the champagne bottles, one on top of the other with a single kick, that was what Mr. Singer insinuated was candy glass?
Yes.
Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
Objection.
Hold on. Let's not characterize
Do you recall the question? I'll
his
rephrase
question, just give verbatim
it. Surely, Judge.
or a summary of his question without characterizing it.
Surely. Do you recall the question by Mr. Singer, wasn't the champagne bottles actually what's called in the film industry candy glass?
Yes.
Do you recall that question?
Yes.
Were they candy glass? Were they genuine, real-life champagne bottles full of champagne that if you emptied them, you'd probably be pretty drunk for a long time?
Yes.
Did you break them?
Yes.
Did you break two of them with a single kick?
Yes.
And in fact, if it was candy glass, would you have gotten glass shards in your feet requiring medical attention at the time?
Objection. Lacks foundation.
Overruled.
If it was phony glass, fake glass, would you have gotten shards in your feet requiring doctors to attend you?
No, I wouldn't have gotten.
And did you get glass shards in your feet?
Yes,
And did they have to treat you for 45 minutes to get them out?
yes,
Going to the bulletproof demonstration, do you recall the question by Mr. Singer? Wasn't it, in fact, hocus pocus like David Copperfield?
yes,
Was it hocus pocus? It was a real live bulletproof glass that before you used it, someone actually fired an automatic weapon into that glass.
Objection.
Yes.
Found leading.
And at the time that you broke the glass, the bulletproof glass with your single bare hand, was the bullet mark, the bullet hole that would have been registered by the gun still there for people to see?
yes. In fact, you could see part of the bullet still in the glass.
And did Mr. Singer ever produce any evidence when he asked you those questions?
No,
Well, I'm going to object.
Objection.
I'll have my chance when I'll have my chance.
All right.
Now, Mr. Singer, well, I'm going to need your exhibit. So, can we take a break, Your Honor? Because I'm going to need Mr. Singer's exhibits.
3 o'clock. Very, very appropriate.
Thank you, Judge.
We're going to have our afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen. Remember my admonitions. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Hold on. Both of you are talking while I'm telling the jury what to do. You're excused.
Well, we've been warned right there in open court by Martin Singer that we will hear more about the so-called bulletproof glass episode. For those of you who may be mystified as to what it's doing in this case, it's rather peripheral. But Mr. Singer began his cross-examination of Mr. Dux by asking him about the demonstration that was done in France in which he was said to have punched his bare hand through a piece of bulletproof glass. Mr. Singer suggesting that indeed it was plexiglass and not real glass, and it was an effort to begin his cross-examination with a rather stunning blow at the credibility of the witness on the stand. It was denied. He said it was bulletproof glass, as you heard. The judge now is talking apparently again to the lawyers. I think we'll listen for a moment and see if it's anything that we'd like to know. Let's listen.
Attempt to put something into evidence relying on a man's word that he had no objection, and then him fight me to try to keep it out, and then the jury sees that I tried to put something in and then it's kept out. If he had a problem, I asked him before we came back, and I said to him, "You certainly have no problem in showing this, do you, Mr. Singer?" And he said, "Certainly not."
Your Honor, I would assume it established foundation for any documentary evidence. But the issue is, you made the ruling. I didn't
The
make the
issue is a
ruling.
man's word.
Oh, Your Honor, I'm not going to get into a debate with Mr. Kramer.
I'm not taking a position on that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Perhaps after the case is over, you may wish me to cite him for contempt or whatever. I'll be happy to consider it, but not in the middle of the case. I'm having enough difficulty concentrating on the issues.
Yes, Judge.
This has been a bad day for me, Your Honor. In the morning, you said Mr. Dukes was smarter than me. I didn't know where I was going. Now I'm possibly going to be cited with contempt. This has been a rough day, Your Honor. Thank you.
I'm an equal abuser.
joking, Your Honor.
I'm an equal abuser.
I'm not joking.
All right.
And we'll take a quick break and return to our coverage after these messages. The testimony has just resumed in that Los Angeles courtroom, and we'll go live.
5, the nice tie contract. Do you recall that?
yes, sir.
Do you recall all the questions that were asked by you of that he asked you, many, many, many questions about them? Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you recall him asking you to look in your deposition transcript late yesterday afternoon about questions concerning them as well?
Yes.
Okay. One question. Does any of that relate to the deal with Van Damme?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Does any of that relate at all to the deal with Van Damme?
No, sir, it does not.
Okay. Now, By the way, is Mr. Van Damme a party to this nice tie agreement?
No, sir, he is not.
Is his signature anywhere?
No, sir, it is not.
Now, Nice Tie Productions, the company, did Mr. Van Damme, Mr. Singer asked you questions about a conversation that you had with Mr. Van Damme about the financial obligation of being transferred. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall the conversation that you had and where you were with Mr. Van Damme at the time you had the conversation?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury and Judge Cato, where were you and Mr. Van Damme when you had this conversation?
I was at his home.
And about when was the conversation?
It was in the, just going to be early evening hours, late afternoon.
When?
About a week after we had begun on the project.
So are we in February 91?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury and Judge Cato, what did Mr. Van Damme say to you on this subject of transferring a financial obligation and what you said to him?
He just turned to me and says, Frankie, he says, I want you to write the story, and I want you to be there with me. And he went into saying that he was going to arrange for me to get the $100,000 paid, not through him now, but through, if I would accept it came from Epic Productions.
Did you respond?
Yes.
What did you say?
I said yes. I was a little concerned about the fact that later on we also had another discussion.
Well, let's just hold it. I want this discussion. What did you say when he said Frankie, et cetera, et cetera?
He just basically let me know that.
What did you say?
What did I say?
What did you say?
I said yes.
There you go. You said yes. Now, did he identify what portion of the financial obligation he wanted you to agree to let him transfer to the production company?
Yes.
What portion? What portion of the financial obligation did he tell you he wanted transferred?
The $100,000.
Did he ever say that he wanted the gross point portion transferred?
No.
Now, Mr. Singer also asked you lots and lots of questions about profits and net profits yesterday and today. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Have I given you a magic marker?
Yes, sir.
Do you have that magic marker?
Yes, sir.
Can you get up off that stand?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, I want you to do this so you're not blocking Judge Cato's view or the jury.
Don't worry about Judge Cato. We're about the jury. You can see.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and all I want you to do is to write the answer down next to the subject that I'm asking you about, okay? All right, here's the first question. With regard to the Nice Tie deal, did that involve profits, yes or no?
Objection calls for legal conclusion.
Overruled.
Did the Nice Tie deal involve profits, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Identify that, profits and yes.
Dyslexia is coming out.
It's all right. Take your time. Okay, and put a yes next to that. Right next to profits. There you go.
Yes.
Okay. Draw a line down the middle. Okay. Now, with regard to put Van Damme up top. Now, with regard to the Van Damme deal, did that involve profits, yes or no?
Objection, legal conclusion, and leading.
Overruled.
Did the Van Damme deal involve profits, yes or no?
No.
Okay, draw a line under that. Next question. Did the Nice Tie deal involve gross points, yes or no?
No.
Objection.
Objection
I'm gonna
is
object.
sustained, and I'm going to ask Mr. Kramer to just ask him what were the terms,
Surely, Your Honor.
as best as he remembers or as he knows, contained in the Nice Tie Epic agreement and the Van Damme agreement.
Surely, Judge Cato.
That way you would not be asking leading questions.
Thank you, Judge Cato. Okay, what financial term or subject matter did the Van Damme deal involve, if it did not involve profits?
Well, it would be gross points. Can I write
All
that
right.
over here?
Yep. Okay. Next, do you recall Mr. Singer asking you today and using a roofing example? Frank?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Do you recall Mr. Singer asking you today and in using a roofing example, whether or not you ever heard of two different parties ordering the exact same roof? You recall that question?
Yes.
Okay. Did Nice Tie and deal on the one hand and the Van Damme deal on the other involve the exact same services, yes or no?
No.
Okay. What I want you to do is identify what services the Nice Tie agreement involved. Involved writing the screenplay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, tell the jury, and as you tell them, after you say each one, after you state the particular one, then you can jot it down. What services the Van Damme deal involved?
Well, first of all, it started with creating the story.
What was the next one?
The next one would be writing it and bringing it to a concrete form.
In writing, so you can touch it and feel it? Okay.
Yeah. The next one would be the treatment.
Okay. What was the next one?
The next thing I did was to stage fights with Mr. Van Damme. We thought that would help in pitching it.
Okay. And you described those pitch meetings with Mr. Armitage and Mr. Diamant?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Mr. Diamant was the owner of Nice Tie? Is that your understanding in Epic?
Yes, sir.
Okay. By the way, did Mr. Van Damme ever tell you what the relationship was, if any, between Mr. Diamant, the owner of Epic / Nice Tie, and himself?
Oh, he told me he was his partner.
When did Mr. Van Damme tell you that he was partners with Mr. Diamant?
He told me after Mr. Diamant had purchased his home.
The home in Chatsworth that you talked about?
Yes.
What
right
did-
after
What words did Mr. Van Damme use?
He just said that he's going to go a long way with this guy, and he called him his partner for future projects. He told me that he had offers elsewhere, but because Diamant had purchased him the home, he felt obligated to do his dealings with him
And Mr. Diamant
and bring him in as a partner.
and Mr. Diamant was the owner of the production company.
Yes.
Okay, next service you did. We've got 4 so far. What's next?
Well, one thing comes to mind. I took only $50,000 for the writing services.
Would you ever have taken $50,000 and agreed to let Ed Kamara take $225,000 plus production bonus had you not been told by Mr. Van Damme that you would more than make up for it with the Grosse Pointe deal?
Objection, Leading Your Honor.
Sustained.
Would you tell the jury why did you agree to take just $50,000 and consent to having Mr. Ed Kamara, the co-writer, take at least 4 times, if not 11 times, your amount?
Because Jean-Claude Van Damme had promised me I'd make it up on the Grosse Pointes.
Okay, what's the next service?
I think the next one would be costumes. Coming up with an idea of the different costumes that would look good.
Was that designed to make the film realistic, or was it for some other purpose?
To make it look realistic.
Okay, go ahead.
Next one would be create merchandising characters that might help in the selling of the film and raising capital.
And did you turn over to Mr. Van Damme the merchandising book that you drafted
Yes.
with the various drawings and diagrams?
Yes, I did.
Okay, next. Did you do anything with regard to locations or sites?
Yes.
Tell us.
Well, one of the things I did is I gave him a list of exotic sites
Okay.
that I thought would be spectacular to shoot, because he was going to, he wanted to direct the picture.
Okay, next.
I provided a list of locations of schools in China.
Were those the academies you described earlier that had been made illegal under the communist regime?
Yes.
Hold on, Mr. Kramer. Is the easel bothering you?
Sorry.
I can't see what he's writing.
I'm sorry. Let me pull that up. Okay, what's next?
Oh, well, I had begun the script. I had at least 30 pages of script done.
Next.
Created a list of nuances that I thought would be good for Mr. Van Damme.
Could you give an example of what you mean by a nuance?
For example, I noticed when we were working together, he had a habit of taking a cigarette, and rather than using an ashtray, he would always like stand it up on end. So I give a whole list of different nuances that this character could evolve to help with his acting.
Okay. Next.
I began in what I call a Bible, which was just what it was a list of different kinds of fighters and their styles and what the weaknesses are and what I felt they would look good against each other.
Was that the 60-page document or book that you had testified to earlier?
Yes,
And you gave that to Mr. Van Damme?
yes. I also did, I provided just a blanket book of combinations, fight combinations, different sequences. You throw punches and kicks, and what also worked against them. Began working on the choreography in advance, which I matched with a shot sheet. So when he directed, it would go very quickly. This way, I even had in some places I had gotten some advice on like proper lenses.
Camera lenses?
Yeah, also I had a couple ideas in regards to like stop action photography for some movements that he would do that I thought wouldn't look maybe necessarily really well when you're looking at it in real life, but if you did it another way, that you would get a really kind of like spectacular view of it.
Okay. Have we listed everything now? Is there anything else?
No.
All right, why don't you take the witness stand? If something else pops up, interrupt me. We'll come back down and add it.
Oh, real simple things. I started doing some training with Mr. Van Damme over leverages.
Where did you... Oh, is that the training you testified you did at his gym in his home?
Yes. Teaching him techniques.
By the way, when Mr. Van Damme asked you to agree to let him transfer the $100,000 portion of the deal to the production company, did he mention anything or did you discuss anything? What would happen if the production company didn't pay you?
He told me that everything was coming from him and that I could look to him for like a guarantee or as a guarantor.
So if the production company didn't pay the second 50, he was guaranteeing it?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Frank. Next, Mr. Singer asked you, well, isn't it true that you wanted to be set for life, to retire, I think was Mr. Singer's words, off of this deal with Van Damme? You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
Back in 1991, what was Mr. Van Damme's track record in 1991 when he asked you to join him as a partner?
Objection, lacks foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know what his track record was in terms of box office appeal at 1991, January?
Objection, lacks
Sustained.
foundation.
Did you have any risk at the time you made this agreement to have 4 gross points and then eventually 2.5 gross points? Or was it a guaranteed fortune
I
that
had,
was
a
going to
tre-
fall into your lap.
I had a tremendous risk. He had
Tell
never.
the jury, tell Judge Cato about this tremendous risk that you took on.
Well, first of all, he had one picture that never went to the theaters called Black Eagle. As far as I know, never had any theatrical release. He had never done a big budget film up until that time. Even Double Impact, which was his last project, had been a low to medium budgeted film. There was no guarantee that we were going to do a big budget film. It was just, it was still pie in the sky.
Okay. Next, Mr. Singer asked you, isn't it true that there's not a single document in existence before Mike Frankel's March 18th, 1996 letter that refers to this Grosse Pointe deal? Do you recall that questioning?
Yes.
I'd like to show you Exhibit 111.
And that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank John Logican for being our guest commentator.
Thank you.
You've added a lot to our understanding of this, and we hope you'll come back.
I would love to. Thank you.
But our time is up for now. We're going to continue our live coverage of the trial tomorrow. Stay tuned now for Court TV's special report, Microsoft on Trial with June Grasso. I'm Fred Graham, and for everyone here at Court TV, good night.
Reporter, raise your right hand and face the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Please be seated.
And can I ask whichever counsel has, other than the exhibit book, depositions, etc., that are not going to be of any benefit to this witness, that they remove them from the witness stand so that he can have
Thanks, Joe.
more
Appreciate
room.
it. And could we have a very brief sidebar before we get started?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, do you want me to
Oh,
remove
wait.
my exhibit book? Do you need it for his examination?
And of course, Frank Dux, he's the plaintiff. He may be the star of the show. It's probably a little bit of a downer, I think, for the plaintiff's side that this is happening rather toward the end of the day there.
You know, I was thinking about strategy. Do you really want to do this unless you think that you can time it just so that you can end it on a note where the jury has to go home and think about it or whatever else? But I would think that you'd want everybody to start off fresh, especially since you know that given Mr. Singer's record so far, it would be a grueling cross-examination coming up behind.
Well, of course, the cross-examination is what I really want to hear, because here you have a swearing contest. The whole nub of this case is whether you're going to believe Van Damme or you're going to believe this man, Mr. Dux. And yet Mr. Dux has this background in which he has claimed, he has made really extravagant claims about having been a secret CIA agent roaming across the world. His testimony is now started. We'll listen.
That he was merely an actor for hire on this movie.
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Mr. Dux, what is your profession, sir? What do you do for a living?
I'm an author and an educator.
Okay. And what have you written?
I wrote a scholarly work called The Complete Legacy of the Ninja.
What is a ninja?
It's a secret society in Japan. I also wrote.
Is that a fighter of some sort? Or what?
No, they were a society of a transplanted society coming from China and parts of Asia under Prince Regent Shotoku, who wanted to build his first intelligence organization for himself, having done a pilgrimage through China and learning about Sun Tzu, which is a book of war, which is one of the most basic foundations of strategy in martial arts today.
Okay. And do you hold any, have you written any other books?
I wrote a book called The Secret Man.
Okay. And who was that published by?
HarperCollins.
And how much were you paid to write that book, approximately?
Approximately $250,000.
And you said that you've also served as an educator. Have you taught to any police academies or law enforcement agencies?
I'm currently an adjunct faculty member of the Criminal Justice Institute of St. Petersburg, Florida. I've taught for the Narcotics Enforcement Officers Association and lectured on covert operations, undercover planning, and officer safety.
And you are also a martial artist, I take it, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you hold any world records?
I currently hold 16 world records unbroken.
Okay. Could you just give us a handful of examples?
Last world record I attained was in Bercy Stadium in 1993.
Where's that at?
Paris, France.
Okay.
And I broke bulletproof glass. I was the first human being to punch through bulletproof glass barehanded.
And do you still hold that record?
Yes, I do.
Just a couple of others that you can tell us about?
1975 through 1980, I was world champion of an event called the Kumite. It's a no-holds-barred kind of human cockfight, which is the predecessor today of the Ultimate Fight Challenge that you see on pay-per-view.
Did you participate in a film called Bloodsport?
Yes, sir.
And what is the name of the lead character in the film Bloodsport?
So my name, Frank Dux.
And was that based on a true story?
Based on incidents in my life, yes.
And who played Frank Dux in that story?
Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
And is that how you, in that connection, is that how you first met Mr. Van Damme?
Yes.
And did you play any role in or participate in any way in getting Mr. Van Damme that part?
Yes.
Tell the jury what you did.
I was contacted by Mark DeSalle, who's the producer of the project. He had wanted a Michael Dudikoff, who had done a number of films for the production company. He had a track record. He felt that a little more secure, that we'd use somebody with a little more bankable name, had a little bit of a following. But he had been told about Mr. Van Damme, and I was asked to go see a film called No Retreat, No Surrender, where Mr. Van Damme played the villain. I was overwhelmed, along with Sheldon Lettich, who accompanied me, to see the resemblance between Mr. Van Damme and myself, in the sense of the way he moved. I thought he had a lot of talent, but he had some rough spots.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Let me show you a photo.
Well, I'm objecting. Objection. Objection. Prior court ruling, Your Honor.
Have you seen it sidebar here?
I made so many prior rulings, I don't remember.
Well, looks like another sidebar is coming up here as Mr. Duke goes through all of the advance work, if you will, as to how Mr. Van Damme came into this arrangement. I'm trying to figure out what would be the problem with a photograph. Looks like where they were going.
I thought maybe he had not shown it to the opposing counsel.
What would
now,
that require?
why that would require
a sidebar?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. There are quite a number of these occurring here, Fred. So we were talking about that earlier. Here, you said that he has a little bit of a colorful history here. He starts off talking about what he has done in his background as an author, educator, and what's even more interesting is that he also has a number of affidavits along with this from police officers, as you said, police chief, people who are down there. It's almost as if he's saying, call me a liar and I'll call you a bluff.
Well, you know, he appears to be setting himself up for a real tight high wire act on cross-examination, because he is creating, or seems to be, quite an astounding resume. But the problem is he's got to be able to back it up as for whether it's true. And if he goes into, now he mentioned the movie, The Silent Man, the book he wrote about his life.
Right, The Secret Man.
The Secret Man,
Correct.
yes, The Secret Man, which claims that he was this freewheeling CIA agent around the world. If he can't back that up in the teeth of the CIA saying that it's not so, I think he has credibility problems.
Well, let's go back in. Whatever that sidebar was all about, it looks as if that photograph is going to be introduced to the witness as well as to the jury. Let's watch.
Right now. Have you seen that photo before?
Yes.
I offer P17, Your Honor.
Objection, relevance.
On that ground, it's denied. P17 is admitted.
Thank you, Judge. Does that photo look familiar to you?
Yes, sir.
Does that person look familiar to you?
Yes, sir.
Is that Jean-Claude Van Damme?
No, sir. That's me.
Who is that?
That's me, sir.
In what year?
1975 when I won the championship.
And did that likeness, was there a likeness between you and Mr. Van Damme, you as of 75 and Mr. Van Damme as of Bloodsport 1986?
Yeah, so much so that when in my deposition, when Mr. Singer saw this picture, he thought it was Mr. Van Damme, his client.
Did Mr. Van Damme's likeness to you play any role, to your knowledge, in his becoming selected for Bloodsport?
It helped in me lobbying Mark DeSalle.
To your knowledge, was that Mr. Van Damme's first starring or leading role in a major motion picture?
Objection lacks foundation.
Sustained.
Okay. Did you train Mr. Van Damme for that motion picture?
I certainly did.
Well, wasn't Mr. Van Damme already an established world champion martial artist of some sort?
He came from a background that was, from what I could tell, was hard-style karate, didn't move like me. A lot of his moves were more dance-orientated. And to the aficionado, someone who really studied, I felt, at length, at least contact fighting, as opposed to point fighting, they would see a big difference between the two.
And did you train him?
Yes, I did.
So if Mr. Van Damme has testified that you never trained him for Bloodsport, would you take issue with that?
I certainly would.
And did you, in fact, receive a credit on Bloodsport as having personally trained Mr. Van Damme?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you receive that credit as just some sort of throwaway, or did you actually train him?
No, I had to enter into a contract with Mr. DeSalle to train Jean-Claude Van Damme, to reassure that so he would do the part, and I trained him at my own expense and time, and without any compensation.
Okay. Tell the jury, if you would, was Bloodsport a success?
With a $1.5 million investment, and to date, after talking to its director, Newt Arnold, I was told it made over $50 million. I'd say it's a success.
And did you observe whether that played any role in Mr. Van Damme's career?
Objection.
In either a positive or negative way?
Objection.
From your observation?
Sustained. You need not answer.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, let me show you P1 and ask you if this is, in fact, the agreement to train Mr. Van Damme that you just mentioned.
Am I to understand that plaintiff's exhibits are 1 to 100?
They're a lot less, Your Honor. I think it's just one to 17.
Yeah, so we don't need to mention in P1, it's Exhibit 1. It's understood that they're plaintiff's exhibit, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so it's Exhibit 1.
Yes.
I offer Exhibit 1, Your Honor.
Objection to relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Would you read what's in capital letters in the middle of the page where it says Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Jean-Claude Van Damme, trained by Frank W. Dux, Hanshi Dux-Ryu Ninjutsu.
What was the next film that, if any, that you did with Mr. Van Damme after Bloodsport, sir?
We did Lionheart together.
And did you receive a credit on Lionheart?
Yes, I did.
And what was that credit?
I had to share the credit with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Michelle Kesey, and I got fight choreographer.
Can you tell the jury, in a martial arts film, is fight choreography important?
I'd say it's the essence of the entire film.
Could you just tell the jury and Judge Cato about that?
Well, what keeps someone to go back and see it again or buy the videos is the combination of moves. If they're interesting enough, if you can show certain combinations to people who are fans of martial art films or aficionados of the martial arts, they'll buy it because they want to learn the move. They want to learn the combination. If the guy's throwing a certain, let's say, front punch, and you can show a different technique to counter that, they're going to want to get the video, rent it, practice it in the studio. So it's very, very important. Also, it's the heart of the film. I mean, it's like listening to music, you know, a great opera. What would opera be without, without the music? It'd be nothing. You can have the nicest costumes in the world. You could have the nicest movements and stages, but it's the music that's going to make a difference whether it's well received or not.
That's right. Pure opinion, speculation.
Overruled.
Mr.
Goes to weight, not to not to admissibility.
Mr. Dux, did you do another film with Mr. Van Damme after Lionheart? By the way, when was Lionheart?
Oh, we filmed that in 1989.
Okay. And did you do another film after that?
Jean-Claude had asked me to.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to ask you to remember what I told the other witnesses with the explanation that I know we speak differently than we testify.
Yes, sir.
But you have to answer yes or no first and let the attorneys do their job and ask the next question. So the question was, after Lionheart, did you do another film with Mr. Van Damme?
I don't know how to.
Did you perform any services on any other film after Lionheart?
I performed services for a project entitled Double Impact.
Okay. And where was Double Impact filmed?
It was filmed in Hong Kong.
Okay. And did you, in fact, perform those services?
Yes.
Be careful with my reporter.
I sure will, Judge. Okay, that brings us up to what year, Mr. Dux?
That would be 1990.
Okay. Now, Mr. Singer showed Mr. Frankel, your attorney, last afternoon a number of documents and spent some time going over a proposed partnership, which I understand he testified, Mr. Frankel, that it was a proposed series of 5 film deals or 5 film projects?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was in 1989?
That's correct.
Okay, and there was testimony that that project fell through for whatever reason.
Objection, Your Honor. Sidebar.
Why are we repeating somebody else's testimony? So objection is sustained.
Can you give us one question, Your Honor? Yep. As a result of that...
Excuse me, can we go sidebar, Your Honor?
Sometimes it's mysterious why there are sidebars, but Carol Randolph, it may be that he's objecting to the leading nature of some of
Well,
this.
goodness, he should have been objected a lot longer than that, but I don't know, Fred. There have been so many of them. There's a danger, too. Our experience has been that the jury gets a little bit upset. It's late in the day, unless this is a crucial point. Looks as if he's back in there, though. Let's see what's happening in that courtroom.
Objection is put on hold until tomorrow morning at 9:30. I will rule on it tomorrow morning. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to recess for the evening. Please remember my admonitions. Now, you're really getting a lot of information, and don't be tempted to discuss the situation at home with anyone.
Although this obviously is a legal contest, Alan Hartnick, you haven't been practicing law for almost 40 years without focusing on the human dimension of cases. And here's one where The appearance of Frank Dux is disturbing in the sense that one has a sense, especially knowing that he had brain surgery, that somehow he's impaired, that his ability to really participate is affected.
He seems to believe what he says. He seems creditable, and he seems, unfortunately, punch drunk. It's very hard, not being there, to know what a jury would feel about this, but he believes it. It's interesting in terms of perjury. Someone is committing perjury here.
Or there are two people with genuinely honest beliefs in different versions.
But this is a Hollywood fantasy in which the plaintiff really believes by doing almost nothing, he can have a bonanza of $1,500,000. That's a lot of money, and yet he believes it. It may be that because of the former reneged agreements, he feels he's owed something.
Well, I think there's a sense in which he feels the film that was made was his film.
Yes.
And I think that, although it hasn't been directly alleged, is part of the undercurrent here, both emotionally and intellectually.
Right. But in terms of this credit concept, when you do an entertainment contract for a star or a director, credit is as important as compensation. But for a fight choreographer, may not be as important. It may be that he wants something else, mainly money.
Sure. Well, there are many people who want money, and not a lot who get it.
Right.
But it's certainly been a pleasure having you with us. I certainly hope you'll join us again.
A great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we may very well be moving from Los Angeles to Texas, where we're covering a murder trial. Back in a moment.
Did you have the page in front?
Yes.
I just
I'm sorry.
Okay, and the
I
next
was looking in the
question.
wrong place.
Okay. And the next question was, wasn't it a film where you wrote a screenplay and got paid? Was that next question?
Yes, sir.
And is it correct that your answer was a film project? Yes. I thought you were asking. Your questions so far have been films. You haven't asked me about potential projects that never got green lighted.
Yes.
That was your answer, correct?
Correct.
And with respect to your practice of always having written agreements with a production company, isn't that the practice that was followed with respect to Enter the New Dragon for your writing services?
You used the word always in there, sir. I didn't always enter into writing written agreements.
Okay, turn your attention to page, let me go close to you again, page 919.
Yes.
Line?
Let me get the line. Is it correct? Okay, the question is line 10 through 13. Was the question, by the way, do you have a written agreement with the production company?
You do have a agreement.
By the way, you do have a written agreement with the production company for Enter the New Dragon. Is that correct? Answer for writing services, yes. Was that your answer?
Yes.
Okay. And is it correct that the only movie that you did not have an agreement on was a movie called Invitation to Die?
No.
And is it true that with respect to the movie Invitation to Die, that film was done for a friend where you didn't get paid?
Yes. Can I?
You've answered, sir.
And even though you've worked with Mr. Van Damme on a few movies, and I think your testimony was earlier this morning, you worked on perhaps 13 or 14 movies, you've never looked to anyone other than the production company to get paid for your services on that particular project. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Singer. Your question went on for so long, I lost. Can you make it shorter, please?
Why don't we read it from your deposition, since I asked you the specific question then.
Page and line.
929, line 4. Somebody help you find the pages? The question. So even though you've worked on 12 movies or so, and Jean-Claude Van Damme suggested that you get involved in films other than The Quest, you've never looked to anyone.
You have never looked in.
You have never looked to anyone other than the production company to get paid for your services. Is that correct? That was the question.
Yes, sir.
And your answer was correct.
Yes, sir.
Now, by entering into this agreement to write on this movie, you got a substantial benefit, did you not? Other than just getting the $50,000.
What do you mean by substantial benefit?
Well, isn't it true that as a result of this movie, you became a member of the Writers Guild of America, the union?
Yes.
And is it also correct that as a result of becoming a member of this union, working on this project, the production company paid health, pension, and welfare benefits on your behalf for this project?
Yes.
And that never happened before on any movie projects that you worked before, that the union, the Writers Guild, paid your health benefits? Is that correct?
I was the writer on the other projects.
That was not my question. Is it correct that you never got the writers? Didn't you work on projects as a writer before Enter the New Dragon?
I worked on projects, but not ones that were produced.
Well, isn't it your testimony that you helped write the movie Bloodsport?
Considering it was based on my life, yeah, I helped with the writing of the movie.
Well, that's my question. Didn't you write some portions of the script on Bloodsport?
Sheldon Lettich is the writer of Bloodsport, sir.
I'm not asking who got the credit. I'm just asking, did you render writing services on that movie?
I would say more story services than actual screenplay services. I wasn't there typing up the script.
I didn't ask if you typed up the script. Did you render any writing services on the story for the project or the screenplay?
I find when you say writing services, that's rather ambiguous to me, Mr. Singer. Can you be more specific?
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you think if you wrote a story for a movie, that is writing services?
If I wrote the story, yes, and registered it, yes.
Well, Is it your understanding that you're not writing the story unless you register it?
I collaborated with Mr. Ledich on the story, sir.
Mr. Dux, do you consider writing a story or collaborating in the writing of a story to be writing services?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you did that on Bloodsport, correct?
To a degree, yes, sir.
And you didn't get any health, pension, or welfare benefits working on that film, did you?
No, I did not.
And the Writers Guild ultimately determined on this project that ultimately got produced as The Quest, that with respect to your writing services, it was determined that you wrote a portion of the story, correct?
Correct.
And on this film or project, you did get health benefits and pension benefits, correct?
Correct.
You didn't get it on Bloodsport, did you?
No, sir.
And you consider that a benefit that you got these health benefits and pension benefits for you?
Objection, asked and answered. If you forgot, it was yes. I'm not going to let you ask the same question 3 different ways, Mr. Singer. I'm lowering the boom.
You were aware of the Writers Guild credit determination sometime around March of '96. Is that correct? This is just foundation.
I'll let you ask.
I'm not sure about the date. You say March 96?
Well, it was sometime in '96, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can I get 156? Can you turn your attention, before you turn, to your knowledge, Mr. Dux, have you requested through your attorney, Mr. Kramer, that an arbitration be initiated in the Writers Guild for you to get paid any monies that you may be owed for writing services on the film that ultimately got produced, The Quest?
I believe so, yes.
Well, do you remember when I asked you, can you turn your attention to your deposition, page 382?
You say 382, sir?
That's volume 2.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I asked your deposition, in your deposition, page 382, line 21. Let me find it for you to help you. That you've got it. Isn't it true I asked you, when your deposition was a few months ago, to your knowledge, have you requested through your counsel with the Writers Guild that any arbitration be initiated with respect to any monies you may be owed for writing services? Is it correct that your answer was no to that question?
That's correct.
And that was not a true statement, is that correct? My question, Mr. Dux, was that answer correct or was it false?
Excuse me, sir.
When you gave your testimony under oath a few months ago, was your answer false?
I don't recall the conversation between me and my attorney, but I assume it may be true.
So was the answer false, or you think the answer is true?
I just don't recall, sir.
You can't remember today. I'm asking you today. When
Yes, sir.
I'm asking you today, October 29th, 1998. When you gave your answer at the deposition a few months ago, was that answer false?
I could have misspoke. I believe my attorney, Mr. Kramer, did send a letter or something to the Writers Guild.
The answer, am I correct, your answer was false at the time?
I would say yes.